This video is brought to you by Dice, the global entertainment content marketplace. Welcome back to the Story Behind the Story series. In today's episode, we are talking with Henry Davies of Stick and Rudder Films, best known for their documentary-style comedy film Tinks Kitchen and the hilarious comedy zombie flick Caring for the Recently Deceased. If you are a buyer and wish to acquire any of Stick and Rudder's phenomenal titles, or you're a seller looking to get your content out to a global audience, get in touch with us through our website, connect.digital, or email us at dicesales@connectdigital.com. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. Could you just introduce yourself and share a bit about yourself and Stick and Rudder?
Yeah, sure. My name is Henry Davies. I'm a writer and director, and I also often end up producing for one reason or another.
Okay.
But I work as part of an independent production company called Stick and Rudder Films, which my business partner, long-term friend Martin, and I set up. And Martin serves as exec producer. I serve as the roles I've just mentioned, and Lisa, who is Martin's wife, serves as my co-writer.
Okay.
So that's we are. Martin and I go back a long, long way. We were both pilots in the Navy, hence the many years ago. Hence the name for the company.
So that's what inspired it. So being a pilot in the Navy, that's something that's interesting. It was mentioned to me before, I think by Kiki or Sid. How did you transition from one completely polar opposite career path to filmmaking?
So I'd always wanted to. I'd always kept my hand in with theatre initially. This is prior to joining the Navy, and even though I spent 17 years in the armed forces, and it's very intense. Obviously, as you can imagine, if you learn to fly a helicopter, there's not much time for anything else. But once you get on top of it, it's a little bit like driving a very expensive, complex car. So you get used to the kind of rhythm and flow, which allows a little bit of spare capacity. And that spare capacity, I would still go back to my original kind of love, which was theatre and writing and directing. And I would put on plays and what have you to whichever establishment I was at. And I would make, when the digital kind of revolution came along, and I was able to make films and edit, learn to edit. I would then make short films, none of them any good, of course, but that's the way that goes. So I decided to kind of grasp the nettle and made a film that was not surprisingly, I suppose at the time, looking back on it anyway, was about a guy leaving the armed forces to start a new career. The film did very, very well, which much to my surprise. And so that's the kind of genesis. So it was. I found I still, even to this day, call back on some of the skills I learned in the Navy, and as a pilot, you get used to trying to stay a couple of steps ahead and trying to predict emergent problems. And anyone that's been in film production will know that is an invaluable skill and used pretty much every day on set.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Well, there's a few great points that you brought up, but particularly transferable skills, because at face value, you wouldn't think like as I introduced, like they're polar opposite careers, but there are so many transferable skills. And the one that you're talking about is kind of leading a crew of people to complete a task, a mission, if you will, or some sort of objective. So do you find that you always gravitated more towards that sort of, if you will, like leadership role?
Yeah, for anyone that's ever directed anything, they'll know that there is a point on every shoot when the entire cast turn to you, go, right, what now, boss? And it's those are the moments that if you're unprepared for it, they can mean the difference between success and failure. And obviously, I was very lucky to be trained by the very best in the business, and so you kind of get used to that idea of really taking the idea of direction. What is a director? And there are many elements to that. One is you're directing the viewer to what you want them to see through, filtered through the prism of kind of your imagination. But the other one is actually sometimes you just got to take that first step down the line physically. Where you're on step, like this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what we're going to be doing today. And sometimes that's enough for people to come in behind you, go, okay, right, this guy knows what he's talking about. Yeah, so I've really fallen back on that an awful lot, because it's a huge ask. People will obviously do this do the work for money, and everyone obviously should always get paid. But in independent productions, often the budgets are very, very tight. And so you need people to give of their best. And if you want people to give of their best, they need to be inspired to give of their best. So that requires vision and someone who's capable of imparting that vision, at least in my experience. But others do things differently, and that's totally fine and valid too.
I mean, yeah, you bring up a great thing there of obviously if you're in kind of a leadership role and you've got a bunch of people looking towards you of where to go next, it's very important that they look to you as someone who is confident, who knows the next direction, which sometimes isn't always the case. And I wonder if sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you're like, even I don't know kind of like where to go from here, or
but that's why you surround yourself with people who are better than you at the specific tasks. So so it's really important to, I mean, I'm in no way an auteur, even though I've just described myself to you as a writer, director, and producer. But I rely very heavily on the experts around me. I know what I want to see. However, can that be enhanced? Can that be improved? Of course. That's why we have actors. No one does it all themselves. That's why we have cinematographers and producers. And there are moments, of course, when you're like, I'm not sure what to do now. But there are tricks to that. And one of something I learned ages ago was on the first day, certainly for me, on the first day of a shoot, it's like, let's find a complex shot that we can do. Not simply because as a director, if you're walking into that first day, you're going to have some anxiety about how it's all going to go. Maybe you don't know the actors, which is more than often the case. And so, you don't know how that relationship is going to work out. So what I like to do is I like to get all the technical experts to really throw their best into it. So let's establish a long tracking shot that might be on near the end of the film or whatever. Let's do that. Let's build the schedule around that. So hour one on day one, everyone's fully fired up. The vision is this is the tracking shot. We go from A to C via B. And we want this and that, and so it gets everyone start just warming up and starting to work together as a technical team. Meanwhile, I can go off and suck my thumb in the corner and cry about what I'm going to do with the actors. And that's usually just to kind of get things going. That's how I've approached that. One of the other things about kind of having that, I guess, confidence to say, right, this is what we're doing. It's not just for the crew behind you, but it's for those that maybe have invested in you. The team who want to know that the money has been spent and allocated correctly. So you are, you're demonstrating that you have a firm grasp on what you promised them, and I think that's very important and often underrated.
I mean, that follows up to something I actually was going to inquire about. As a smaller production company, like you say, you get a tight budget, so it's important not only for you but the stakeholders that are also working with you to get the most out of that and to feel like you're getting the most out of that. Do you feel a bit of pressure sometimes?
I think if you didn't feel pressure, then you're probably not going to get the best out of yourself and your crew. I think the key there is to not let that pressure overwhelm you, and to make sure that you take, I mean, I always look at it in terms of, and this is going to sound a little bit general, but I think about it in terms of energy and about how you can redirect that. And so pressure, I accept that, and I quite like that. In my old job, we had an awful lot of pressure, but you're trained to kind of deal with it, and you're trained to repurpose that into performance. And I try and bring that. It doesn't always work, but and I do find the whole process stressful. There's no two ways about that. There's a lot to juggle, and I don't find it. It's never a breeze, and nor should it be. But as for I mean, that's how I kind of deal with it. I try and accept. I try and front up to it, accept that pressure, and repurpose it into something ideally creative, and understanding that everyone on that set generally feels a degree of pressure. If I turn to my DIT and say, right, did we get that correctly? Is that all logged correctly? He's got to get that right. If it's the cinematographer or the spark or the gaffer, I mean, it's everyone's got areas of responsibility. It just so happens that as in an independent organization, certainly you tend to wear a few more hats, and they come with different kind of pressures. And for me, it's about making sure you separate those pressures out, so you don't get confused by what the writer might want if you're the writer versus the director versus the producer if you're wearing different hats.
Another question I have is, like, you talked about your transferable skills between careers. Do you feel like there are any specific similarities between the culture or the atmosphere of working in the Navy versus working in kind of media film?
Well, yeah, and I mean, going back historically, the big British studios were staffed by ex-service people coming out of
Okay.
coming out of conscription, so
Okay.
from national service. And I can't remember how it broke down, but it was like rank studios was army, and it was kind of broken down like that. And what all the armed forces have in common is they like to have a structure. Right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so if you look at a call sheet now, which is obviously what we use day-to-day shooting, issued the night before, and all the detail on there is almost exactly the same as what is still issued today in the armed forces, which is called daily orders. So when you wake up in the morning, because you looked at the night before, what time sunrise is, sunset, what you expected to do that, what serials are occurring, and it's exactly the same as a call sheet. So yeah, there's an awful lot of common ground there. And the other misunderstanding, common misconception rather, about the armed forces is that it is not a creative place. And actually, most problems that most plans that are cooked up, just they do not survive first contact with reality or the enemy. So you're in a constant state of creative arousal, trying to use creative problem solving, trying to deploy a kind of creative problem solving to get to your end result. So it's not too dissimilar. The only real difference is in the kind of hardcore creative stuff where you actually need time and space to sit down and think about a scene and work with actors. That's very different, but that's just a completely different chunk of skills. Really.
Yeah, I could definitely see now the similarities between the two, especially if you're comparing generals or colonels to like directors, and then taking that, all the way down to the hierarchy to different sorts of people like runners.
I mean, a general doesn't do the flying of the helicopter. He doesn't do the tanks. He doesn't carry the weapon into combat. Everyone's got their specialization, and it's not about going for the general or for the director. It's not about saying I am the most important person on the set. Just the opposite. You are essentially what we call a servant leader, where you are, as long as your vision is being delivered to the screen, and as long as that element of the direction is being taken care of, I feel anyway that you should be making sure that everyone on that set feels empowered to bring their A game, and that's different to kind of what was traditionally been understood as the top-down leadership.
Yeah. We touched a little bit on kind of your background and history of wanting to get into film and your love for it, but I was really interested to know, before you worked in the Navy, maybe when you were a little bit younger, what your relationship with kind of film was like, and wanting to be a filmmaker. Did that kind of thought cross your mind in your younger years?
Yeah, I mean, I started. So I was a child of the '80s. I was very lucky because some of the all-time classic movies have come out of that period. Many more have been made since, but to be the beneficiary of seeing some of the seminal works by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Lawrence Kasdan and all these superheroes and Robert Zemeckis superheroes of that kind of that era and John Carpenter, of course, and that it was every day there was something new and spectacular and never before seen rolling out on the biggest screens you could find. So you didn't have to go to a small independent cinema to find this. Everything was coming out on the big screen all the time. So and it was also coincident with the rise in VHS. So I got to see things I really shouldn't have seen at my age quite early, because the checks and balances weren't quite there yet. And so I had a pretty rich history with cinema and with but quite mainstream at that time. And then as I got older, I gravitated towards more art house stuff. You'd see things referenced in film, and someone would say, "Oh, that comes from a Kurosawa movie," and you go, "Well, who's Kurosawa?" And you go find that in a local video store, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of good ones there. And then that leads you to Japanese cinema, and then of course the bounce across to Europe, and then you're watching Brunel, you're watching everything from the French New Wave, and then you see it feeding back into mainstream cinema. I found that all fascinating, and then all these different viewpoints and these different styles. So that was just kind of happening in the background. I hadn't thought about being a filmmaker, or I didn't even think that was a thing you could do. I was brought up in Somerset. There's nothing really. There's no film scene there. But what I did fall in love with theatre and performance, and I don't think I was terribly good, but I was quite big, and so I hugged a lot of stage, and I think I was reasonably charismatic, because people always used to comment on, "Oh, I couldn't take my eyes off you." I was pretty shit, if I'm honest, but it was like, it's the benefit of youth, I suppose. I really enjoyed it, and I love the whole process, and I found myself unwisely suggesting things, age of 16, 17, and suggesting things to the director. Could we try this? Could we try that? And I was very lucky to work with some terribly indulgent directors, not just at my school, but then local theatre. And then I through a very lucky audition, I got to the age of, I think I was 18, maybe 19. I worked with a company called the Joan White Theatre Company, and Joan White was a contemporary of Laurence Olivier, and she acted with him in I think the film version of As You Like It, which happened to be the play that her company was putting on in London. And I spent many months working up there, and it was like, I thought it was like a big break, because they give me this juicy part. That's what I thought, and I got to the table read, and it wasn't the juicy part I thought it was. It was almost the same character name, but it was like I came on the last scene, almost the last line of the play, like one line or two lines maybe. But I was young and naive, didn't know anything, so it was really exciting, and I absolutely adored it. But things conspired against my progression in that world, but I never lost the love for it.
Yeah, well, that's particularly interesting as well, because you're kind of really painting a picture of your sort of character, of the person you were when you were younger, and there is that sense of enthusiasm and creativity that was just,
for sure.
The way you described it to me is almost like kind of a bit of a fire inside you, rather than just somebody that turns up and plays the part. You always seem to be very invested in the storytelling and everything that was going on.
I am very passionate about stuff like that, creative stuff like that. So if I get my tail up about something, it's a bit incorrigible. You asked the very first question. You asked, how do you get into kind of filmmaking? Yeah. And really, the honest answer is bullheaded enthusiasm. I was like, I want to make a film, and I'm going to make a film, and it's going to be good. And it was like, that's like kind of, honestly, that's kind of what steered me, which is, I wouldn't suggest that as a game plan for anyone, but it was. That's, sometimes you just have to be driven by passion to get stuff done.
You say that there as well, but like something I always see circling around, for better or for worse, is the idea of you kind of have to believe in yourself, and almost sometimes it can come across a little bit arrogant, but you have to believe in yourself before anyone else is, because if you don't believe in your project, then that's going to shine through like the body language or the nonverbal. And it seems like you did well in even as you've said to yourself, maybe some of your earlier projects weren't as good, but because you believed in that, that's kind of what helped that progression over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you fail more often than you succeed. That's just life, right? So it's not. I've been called arrogant. I've felt arrogant before. I've acted in an arrogant manner. And honestly, every single time it was a facet of self-protection to tie into exactly what you're talking about, where you feel very exposed. You're out there. This is my idea. This is the film I want to make. These are my words. This is how I want the scene to go. Yeah, I mean, that is an enormously arrogant place to be. To go, yes, this is the way exactly the way it should be. And so you need to back that up with something. The best thing that could ever happen to a filmmaker that is working predominantly on their own is to partner up with someone that believes in you, because then there's two of you, and you have a cheerleader that can say, "Oh, check out what this guy's doing, or this girl's doing. They're awesome," and that is worth its weight in gold. And that transformed my kind of the way I could interact with my creative process, certainly, because it's very, very. It can be, for those that maybe will watch this, who do work as almost not a one-man band, but in somewhat in isolation,
Yeah.
it can be a lonely and vulnerable place. And yeah, you need to surround yourself with allies as quickly as you can.
And that sounds like two things that are very important to both industries, both being part of the Navy or the military and being a part of the film industry, which I imagine probably helped you learn those skills that you have in teamwork.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great deal of self-reflection involved, right? And so to go from an environment where everyone was quite self-reflective and self-aware, I'm talking about the military now, and so we're all in service to a goal or a mission, whether it's flying a helicopter or whatever it might be, and to go from that to being kind of like outside of that and just on one's own, that's quite dislocating. So then you have to kind of go and find yourself a new tribe. And prove to people that your vision is worth something, and that you are worth something, and you are honest, and you have integrity, and you will respect the other people in that you fold into your creative process. And often, let's not forget, James, that people sometimes, a lot of people like to be led. They want to be on that journey. They want to let's go and see what's going to happen over here. And some of, I've developed some very close friendships with people that just kind of heard about me and what I was doing, and none of it was very special, James, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was, but I think that what you talked about, the kind of enthusiasm, they're like, yeah, this sounds like fun. And then we've developed very close friendships based on that, and because they gave their best, and they matched me and sometimes surpassed what I was doing, and I'm endlessly grateful for that, and I think gratitude and respect and all that, they go a very long way when you're trying to form an effective team.
Yeah, so another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, kind of moving on to the next question, is of course you have a few different titles on Dice, and they're completely different genres as well. You have kids titles all the way to drama. I just wanted to kind of give the floor to you to kind of open up a bit about what your repertoire of content is and what you've got kind of going on at the moment.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Well, first of all, I'm very pleased to partner with Dice, and bear in mind, if you do include that in the final edit, I'm not being paid to say that. What I love about this relationship is that I do, as I've mentioned before, I feel like I've got a cheerleader, someone that's actually like, this stuff's worth something, and we want to promote it, and that means a lot because as anyone that creates stuff, it's all very personal. So when people embrace it, that it's like getting a good old fashioned hug, James. That's what it's like, and everyone likes a hug. So I've got three titles on, or about to have three titles on Dice right now. The first one that I'm absolutely adore is a movie called Caring for the Recently Deceased. This was made a couple of years ago, I think 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. And it's a very black comedy that the star Sue Johnson, who was probably most famous from the royal family, and Downton Abbey. She was in Downton Abbey, which she was cast in that around about the same time as we were shooting, actually. And she referred to it as, like, she said, I would have done this for free. It was so weird, and I loved that. I was like very, very pleased to hear that. And it's essentially what I would consider to be the last zombie movie you'll ever need, insofar as it's about a couple whose power dynamic completely shifts when the husband, who's been rather lazy and feckless, sitting on the couch drinking beer, dies of a heart attack and comes back as the undead. But the great news is he's quite easily bossed around, so she kind of takes the power dynamic shifts. Yeah, like I said, it's a dark comedy, but the what I love about it more than anything is the cast, and I was absolutely blessed to have Sue Johnson, Melanie Walters, who was in Gavin and Stacey and was in the film Submarine. She's just well, they're both wonderful actors. They work so well together as the main pair. We had Phil Marr played the zombie. Now Phil is a character actor, and many won't know his name, but you will recognize his face, because especially over the last year and a half, he popped up in a very prominent role in Wonder Woman 84, which I was not expecting. And then he was the guy in the latest Bond movie who, at the Spectre get-together, releases the virus, and he's there. So I was like, oh God, that's Phil. Yeah, so and he's been in Game of Thrones because he's got a very unique look, and he did tireless work for us in in a virtually wordless role because zombies can't speak. So, and then we had one of the big wins. I was so excited to work with an acting hero of mine, a character actor called David Schofield, who was, for my generation, best known as the guy that says in American Werewolf from London, "You made me miss," but is also featured at was very high profile in Gladiator, and then has been a staple of British TV and stage for many, many years. And he's just a lovely, lovely guy and a supremely talented actor, so magnetic on screen. And then Abigail Thor was also in it, and Abigail is a lovely woman, a very talented actor, and she's the daughter of John Thor, Inspector Morse. So she's, just after we were filming, she I think it was just after she got into she got the role in Endeavour. So which is young Morse, right? So I think that's on series 7 now, something like that. So that's going great guns, and she's touring actually right now. She's touring the country in a play. She's a lovely person as well. And then finally, and this is the most amazing one, because Alex Ferns, I brought him in for one line as this slimy solicitor. It's a great line. He absolutely nailed it. I was like, who is this guy? And I'd seen he'd been in EastEnders, which I didn't really watch, if I'm honest, but I'd seen his show reel. I was like, oh my God, he's really talented. And he'd been in something called Joyeux Noël, which is a World War I drama. So he came highly recommended. I had no idea how talented this guy was going to be, so we rapidly wrote a couple more lines. I didn't have room to write any more for him, but he nailed every one of those as well and changed the dynamic on the set and really brought things to life. He's also he then went on to be in a few plays up in London, but had a very big moment in the show Chernobyl, where he played Glukov, the naked miner, captain of the miners, and became this kind of meme, this sensation, marching around completely stark naked in his mining boots and his mining hat. So he went from doing great work in that. He won a Scottish BAFTA, and he went on from that to he's just about to open in the new Batman movie. He plays Commissioner Loeb, who is who I think is the bad guy commissioner opposite Commissioner Gordon, played by Felix Leiter, whose name I have forgotten, Jeffrey Wright. Yeah, so he's done incredibly well, and he promises me there's something even bigger in the works, but he's not allowed to tell me what that is. So I can't imagine what's bigger than Batman, James. I can't.
Yeah.
So that's Caring for the recently deceased, and we took that across the world to a bunch of film festivals, and we dubbed it into Korean and into Spanish and South American Spanish as well. And it did very, very well and was well received and won a host of awards. It was lovely to take that out on the road. And then you guys at Dice were like, well, what else you got? I was like, well, I got this other thing I shot a while back. It's called Tinks Kitchen, and it was really like my first proper feature film. And the one I mentioned before about a guy leaving the armed forces to go start a new life. This new life that I chose for this character was running a pub, and it was based on a collection of people I met and worked with in the armed forces who maybe weren't the finest of us, and they were a little bit stuck in their ways, very conservative, and I would just watch these guys do their work, and they were usually quite capable, but not my kind of people. But I couldn't get away from the fact they were really compelling because they were so set in their ways. So I thought, if you take someone like that and you put them into one of the most egalitarian environments you can, which I, having worked for many years as a very young man in pubs and bars, a pub or a bar is super egalitarian. You have to learn how to talk to the drunk at the corner of the bar up to any visiting kind of dignitary. So you really got to be on your game, and you got to be flexible. So I wanted to kind of document that, and it's shot like a documentary because we didn't have much money, if any, really. And it was I was really pleased that we obviously had no money for marketing or anything like that. But I was really pleased that we got to a couple of festivals, and we ended up as a finalist in the Vancouver International Film Festival, which was a real surprise to me. But more important, when I got a call from a film festival saying, hey, look, you put this in for the feature film category, but we moved it to the documentary category because obviously you filled in the form wrong. And I'm like, no, it's actually this is just fiction.
Yeah.
And they were very surprised. I'm not sure I made any friends pointing out their error, but it was personally kind of fun for me to do. And I really enjoy that. For me, and anyway, it's kind of endlessly quotable. The lead character Tink, of the title, is an insufferable arse who learns to change eventually. But yeah, it was shot very close to me. We were very lucky to be given the run of a pub for a couple of weeks. We shot it on no money and in a very tight turnaround. But yeah, it was really well received, and I'm very proud of it. It's older, but I'm still proud of it. And then the final, not final, but the latest thing that's about to be uploaded is this, as you mentioned, a kids show, a 3D animated space adventure that is called Star Corps: Defenders of the Solar System, and this is a property that we're really passionate about. It's the idea that the Constellation Academy hangs somewhere in our solar system that's immovable. It's like Hogwarts in space, if you will.
Okay.
And so it's where the cadets go and learn how to be part of the Star Corps. Star Corps defends the solar system and indeed beyond the solar system against potential threats, foreign and domestic. And they have to work together. There are two teams. There's a team that's primarily made up of the female characters and a team that's primarily made up of the male characters. They have to learn how to work together as an effective team to go and defend the planets in the solar system. And the cast is really of characters is they're really fun. They're really exciting. There's some science in there, so we want to kind of embrace the STEM learning especially for girls, but also for boys, and highlight that we always treat, whilst there are licenses taken with space travel, we still want to impart some of the kind of wonders of science and the solar system, and it's very funny. We have the big bad guy is a guy called Ron Terabyte, and he suffers from an enormous case of short man syndrome. He's like Napoleon if he had access to space weaponry, and I love him. I absolutely love him. But it's a good, fun, diverse cast, and we follow these two best friends, Soldier and Scout. So Soldier's a boy and Scout's a girl, best mates, and they as they come up through the academy, and then have to choose which side they go and join, whether it be the girls' team or the boys' team. And then they are the ones that are the catalyst for this integration that actually shows that we are far better working together and embracing our differences to create a more united front.
Yeah, I've got to say, you've got a spectacular way of articulating these stories that makes I imagine anyone listening would really, really want to watch them. After that description.
The purpose, right?
I mean, they just sound amazing. Because something that struck me is that they're so, on paper, such different stories, each film. So I wanted to kind of ask, more than even interpret, do you find that there are any kind of subconscious underlying consistent themes between each story you make?
That's a really great question, and it's difficult to answer because I haven't given it a great deal of thought. But I have tried to look into why I gravitate towards those kind of stories, and I think it is usually to do with the subversion of an existing power dynamic. That's the kind of common ground. So in Tinks Kitchen, the first thing I did, there's this guy that was the major breadwinner, made all the decisions in the family, what came from a very structured environment, and then everything that he knew was turned on its head. And his wife becomes absolutely pivotal to running that business correctly, and she's the one with the clear vision, and he ends up being like Basil Fawlty. It is like Fawlty Towers meets The Office.
Okay.
And with caring for the recent deceased, as I described it, you have Glyn, who sits on the was the major breadwinner, sits on the couch all day watching the cricket while his wife tidies up around him and keeps in charge of the house. And when he dies, that power dynamic shifts completely, and that's based on real world observations of watching, for instance, members of my family who, as they get older, the male members of the family they just become this walking wallet, and they're pushing the trolley, but they're there to pay for it and to reach the stuff from the top shelf. And the female member of the family does everything, makes all the decisions, and probably has the entire time. So, but has never really been in a position to pull the levers, if you see what I mean. And so that's a subversion. And I think with Star Corps, Defenders of the Solar System, again, there's an element there where we have established dynamics. In many ways, Star Corps is about family as well. Insofar as you got, it's difficult to explain without actually seeing it, but you have these two sets, these two groups that should get along fine, but they're not. There's friction there. It's almost like a divorced family kind of dynamic, and about how the young people coming up, so the offspring, the kids, in this case, Scout and Soldier, who I've just described, they look at that and go, why can't they get along? Which is something, as a child of divorce, I remember thinking, why can't my parents just sort this out? Why can't they talk about this? Yeah. And I think that there's an element of that, like the youth going, like seeing with absolute clarity what should be happening, and for the first time in their lives thinking, actually, those are my heroes, and this is kind of part of what we do with Star Corps. Those are my heroes, and yet they're acting like they'd tell me off for acting that way. So I again, it's that kind of subversion. I think that's probably, and James, that is the first time I've really thought about it in those terms. So thanks for asking that question. I'm gonna go and self-analyze for like a day. Thanks.
No, I mean, it's great. but it's a great thing. Whether it's great for you to have to self-analyze for a day afterwards or not, yeah. I love hearing that, because there is something in people that are particularly creative. There's something about themselves on a subconscious level that they never realize that they're putting into their work, that they put into everything that they do. I love exploring that with other people, because for me, listening to you saying that, then there's something very meaningful to you, it sounds, about this idea of like power dynamics.
Well, it's interesting because the next thing that I'm working on is a script called Lady of the House, and it examines power dynamics within a 1920s household. And
another thing that I noticed, actually, now kind of thinking over it, was that everything has quite so the way you're describing these stories to me, they have quite maybe comedic wouldn't be the right word, but there's a light-heartedness about them in each story. They're not, even though there's a serious undertone, they're always presented in quite a maybe if you could pick a better word, the one that I think of is like a comedic way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love comedy. I love to laugh. I think, we're talking about power dynamics. That's inherently amusing, because, you got to remember that when I came from an environment where, you actually wore a uniform. So, which is an absurd construct. The whole thing's an absurd construct. So once you see, that's the word to use, is absurdity. And there is absurdity in human behavior at every step of the way. I'm guilty of it. You are. Everyone is. And And I like to see that. I like to pick that out in myself and in others in life, which makes me a nightmare to hang out with on a night out. But that's fine, because it's a constant. I can't stop myself taking a piss. But it's good for building characters, because you can find tension in and absurdity and pomposity and the puncturing of it. So they're definitely, for sure. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, I could make a straight drama, but I would be itching to stick a joke in there. In fact, I've done that. I like to laugh. I like to see other people laugh. I like to tell stories that make people laugh, and this is part of it. I mean, the thing that the Lady of the House is much more serious in tone, but there still has to be, for me, the lightness of touch has to be accessible.
So, because the next question was like, what about these kind of stick and rudder productions do you think will appeal to audiences? But as I said, I just feel like the way you've already described it in this whole conversation, it must. If it doesn't, I don't know what else to say. But I wonder if there's anything you kind of want to add to that.
So this is the weird thing, right? So Caring for the Recently Deceased did really well over in the States. Like, people loved it over there, and yet I was was sitting behind, as it was in a festival, I was sitting behind this couple, and this woman leaned across to her husband and said, "I don't think this is going to do very well because it's so British." And actually, that was kind of its strongest suit. I knew exactly what she was talking about. I mean, this is a show that's set in suburbia and revolves around a lot of tea and biscuits, and just happens to be a zombie in there. You know, I hope people enjoy it. It's always written, anything like this is written, it's from my perspective, but it's so people do enjoy it and can kind of find it accessible, enjoyable. But I don't, you know, there need to be deeper themes to it. It's not about teaching people lessons or anything, but it's about highlighting some of the absurdities in our own behavior. And I think the more self-awareness we can have, the better we will function as a society and as individuals. And it's a little bit about that. And I when I made Tinks Kitchen, my dad was terribly worried it was all about him. And I was like, it's not about you. I mean, I've seen some of the behavior in you, but I've seen it in myself as well.
So obviously Lady of the House is next. Where are you in the process of that production at the moment?
Well, it's still scripting. So I was hoping to have that ready for the end of the year. That's not going to happen now. So, and also I haven't really discussed anything to do with, because what I like to do is do the initial draft, and then Lisa and I get together and we kind of chop it up and rewrite it. And so I haven't even had the initial discussions about what kind of budget we'd be looking at and all that kind of stuff. So it's scripting right now. The first draft was complete, and I over lockdown I looked at it. I was like, actually, this 30% of that needs to go and be re-looked at for the very reasons that you kind of touched on. It just wasn't terribly engaging, and I was far too concerned with the story I was trying to tell rather than the emotions I was trying to elicit. So it's just retooling that right now, but so scripting stage. Just as a final question before we do wrap up, I just wanted to ask if there's anything that I've kind of missed that you want to talk about or you want to share. I don't think so, James. It's been really nice to have a nice wide-ranging chat. I will reiterate that I'm really pleased to have a partner like you guys, because you seem to really care, and you kind of get behind what filmmakers are doing, and it's that's not always the case, so it's very much appreciated.
What do you think of this episode? Let us know down in the comments below. As always, you can get in touch with us through our website connect.digital and our email address at dicesales@connectdigital.com for business inquiries. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. Have a great day.